going to talk for 20 minutes about social entrepreneurship, not entrepreneurship, social entrepreneurship, and a little story about what I do now, which is around an event called the Homeless World Cup. I need to move on one. Yeah. When we talk about homelessness, this is the sort of image that comes into your mind, all of our mind. And these images are taken all over the world. And in every country in the world now, there's homelessness. Huge numbers of people living in poverty. They say there's 100 million in the world, according to United Nations. Figures that are not comprehensible to any of us with our brains to think about how we might start to deal with these problems. And you have a situation in the world where the rich get rich and the poor get poorer, and the gap between them grows. So some major challenges we have in the world. But we can change it, and in the story I'll tell in a little while, I'll demonstrate how we change it and how we change those people that have been lying on the street that I just showed you, which is the traditional image of a homeless person, into a football star. And I'll prove that to you in the next few minutes. First of all, though, social entrepreneurship, what's that about? Well, social entrepreneurs are exactly the same DNA as entrepreneurs. Very driven, prepared to take risks, creative, sometimes very difficult to get on with, but driven to make things happen. A lot more of talk about social entrepreneurs now. The only difference with social entrepreneurs and social entrepreneurs is social entrepreneurs are driven to create social change. Entrepreneurs is about making money. The measurements that social entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs will have the same. So put entrepreneurs and social entrepreneurs together and they'll get on extremely well. And they'll work in between the traditional sectors. So where the three traditional sectors, public, voluntary and private sit, social entrepreneurs will sit in between. A lot of discussion in the UK, you'll see in the media, those of you who follow it, about the public sector and less taxation, spending cuts, and social entrepreneurs coming into that space where the public sector is exiting from. We as an organisation don't really go near that space. We're much more in the other space here next to the private sector. So we work with large corporations and so on who have aims to create good corporate social responsibility policies, and we can connect with them because they're looking to create more about sustainability. So a very interesting space emerging, and it's a relatively new space, say about 15 years old. And Muhammad Yunus, most of you will have heard of, the Nobel Peace Prize winner. He's probably the best known social entrepreneur in the world. Sensational things he's done in Bangladesh in terms of lifting people out of poverty through a microloans scheme. Fantastic statistics. And he's a serial social entrepreneur, so he's created other social enterprises, including Grameen phones, and he now works with a joint venture with Danone, the big food corporation, in terms of yogurt and getting food to people poorer people in Bangladesh. He's sensational in terms of what he's done there. And the concept, of course, of microfinance has been copied all over the world. So millions of people have benefited from a very, very simple idea. There are lots of social entrepreneurs, and I'm lucky to be part of a group called the Schwab Foundation, which is connected with the World Economic Forum, and there's lots of us who are kind of put together in one space. Here's a guy called Bart, and he's got an organization called Hero Rat. He likes rats, one of the few people in the world who likes rats. He trained the rats to find landmines. Dogs who are used are quite inefficient apparently. Rats are incredibly efficient at finding landmines, so they can clear landmine much quicker and they don't blow themselves up in the process. Also now they're experimenting with these rats detecting people who are ill. So they found they've trained the rats to move to people who have TB, which is spreads very, very quickly. The rats can detect it. So a sensational impact that he's making, but a kind of slightly crazy idea. Here are some social entrepreneurs together. What happens when you put them together? They learn from each other, get into social franchises, take things forward. So this is a picture here. One person who's invented a wind-up computer for poorer people living in Africa. No access to computers. Imagine if you couldn't access any computers, how you wouldn't be able to connect in the world. wind-up computer at the cost of $100. And this picture shows the other social entrepreneurs, a guy from Malaysia there going, you can see their brain working. Okay, how can I use this? How can I develop this? And we sometimes call this picture the crazy gang, because these are the people who come up with micro-lending, rats, wind-up computers, and Homeless World Cup. So crazy ideas that start together and then put us together, and then we can add value in terms of what we're doing. So social entrepreneurship, social entrepreneurs can make a major impact in the world. So what we do here, and it's a critical thing that I always say about social entrepreneurs is these three words. It's about sustainability, it's about innovation, and it's about scale. So all the time we're talking about how we can make our enterprises bigger. And we are on a journey always, which is wonderful when you get to the top. Absolutely brilliant moments when you have success, but also very, very difficult climbs sometimes, very difficult days in terms of what we're trying to do. But it's a journey we choose to take, and I always, when I do talks, liken it to being on a mountain. So the Homeless World Cup was devised in a bar. Two of us, myself and a colleague, were having a beer after a conference on homelessness in Cape Town. And we'd saying this was a fabulous conference, and we're all inspired internationally, but none of us are homeless. We're either directors of street papers, because it was a street paper conference, or editors, or founders, or whatever. How can homeless people benefit in the same way we are benefiting? So we threw some ideas around, and we came up with the idea of football, because anybody could be involved, and the barriers of doing conferences and so on around visa laws and employment law were quite high. So we talked about it and drank some beer in the evening, and by the end of the evening invented the Homeless World Cup. So the creative moment was in the bar. Critical next moment was breakfast the next day, because we all have these conversations and they're wonderful, and then they stay in the bar. But the critical next thing is, are we going to do it? So the next morning we agreed we were going to do it, and 18 months later we had the first one, first event. And this is in Graz in Austria, because the colleague I was speaking to is Austrian. And what happens in the year, in the lead up to this, is that we go to homeless people in the street and ask them if they want to play football. And it's a very simple game to get involved in. All you need is a ball, and anybody can play. Doesn't matter how good you are, how bad you are, and some of the people involved with us are terrible at football. Doesn't matter, you can get involved, and you can be any age, and you can be any standard, and you can play anywhere. So we could have a game now, left side versus the right side if we wanted to, move the chairs and have a game. You can play inside, outside, any size of pitch. So football is a great way of getting people involved. And then as a result of people getting involved, they start to tackle some of the issues that are facing them, which can be quite huge in some cases, many with drug and alcohol problems. But as a result of wanting to play football, if you're taking drugs and alcohol, you can't really play football. So people want to play football. And then we invented this aim, which is once a year we have this event, so people are kind of inspired and say, I want to go. And simply what happens is, in each of the countries involved, a team is selected to come to the event, to represent their country. And we play street soccer, so it's a small court, 8 in a team, 4 on and 4 off at any one time, 7 minutes each way. It's very, very fast. It's a week long. You never go home. Unlike other tournaments, if you lose, you don't go home, you stay. And some of the teams are great and some are terrible, it doesn't matter. And so we had this event in Graz, we had 18 countries coming, and we didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know the outcome. We thought it would work, but we weren't really sure. And we had 3 fantastic outcomes. First of all, the homeless people changed out of all recognition. You could actually see them growing in front of you as they had wearing their football tops. Proud to represent the country. Better ambassadors for the country than the professionals, by a long way. Sang the national anthem louder, and you'd be surprised that they might do that. Fantastic, so they changed. Then the people who were watching, and we had big crowds, so big we had to bring in screens so that people could watch in the back. They all are applauding, they're allowing their children to go to the homeless people and sign autographs, which they wouldn't normally have done the day before. Homeless person in the street, same person, begging, wouldn't let them anywhere near that person. Now they're signing autographs, they become heroes. So all the attitude of the people watching has changed completely. And afterwards, they'll see a homeless person in the street and they'll say, could be a footballer. potentially. So that was a big change. And then the third one was that the media, the world's media came. Hundreds of journalists came to this first event with television cameras, and the coverage was 100%, not 99%, but 100% positive. And normally media coverage of homelessness is negative. All these people are upsetting the tourists, they're no good for the city, blah, 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 etc. But it was positive. So we had this huge success in Graz at this first event, and we were only going to do it once, and then we started to do some research. What was the impact of what was happening? And we found that 80% of the players had changed their lives. So got houses, got jobs, come off drugs and alcohol, were becoming coaches, going to college, etc. We didn't believe the figures because this figure was so high. I'd worked with homeless people since 1993. You never get statistics like that, so we didn't believe them. So we checked, and it was 80%, and we checked again, and we checked 4 or 5 times, and it was right. So we decided to continue doing this event. Next year, in the following year, we're in Gothenburg, and now 26 teams are taking part. Then we're in sunny Edinburgh, and it was sunny the whole week in Edinburgh in 2005, and 32 teams, that's Princess Street Gardens, 32 teams are taking part. Then we're in Cape Town in 2006, and now we've really kicked on. There's now 48 teams there. Many African teams are joining in. Just before this picture's taken, the homeless people have marched down the street, and in the balcony there behind, which is the balcony where Mandela made his famous speech after he was released from prison, the president of South Africa stood and saluted all the homeless people. So can you imagine? We never thought this was possible in the bar when we were having a discussion that one day a president of one of the biggest countries in the world would salute homeless people. There was 100,000 people in the square that day. Massive numbers came out to watch, and there's one of the all-time great footballers, Eusebio, in the middle, welcoming the teams on the pitch. So we got to that point, and critical to say is it's not just about an annual event. So now we have the partners in nearly 75 countries around the world, and the critical work that goes on all the year round is taking the homeless people off the street and getting them involved in playing football. They all can't represent their country. It's only a little part of what we do. The week is the marketing arm, or the tip of the iceberg, if you like, or whatever you want to describe it. The real work goes on all the year round. And now we have thousands of people involved. So later this year we'll be in Mexico City with the event, and now there's 40 to 50,000 homeless people involved in football projects around the world. So here's one, for example, in Holland, where they are quite sophisticated and have different teams in different cities and different projects connected up with government, football authorities, NGOs and corporations, and then culminating in an event like the international event, except it's in the middle of Amsterdam in Dam Square with the different teams. Then we have a whole number in Mexico, 7,000 homeless people involved in Mexico. In Kenya, this is a different story here. This is in the middle of the Kibera, the big slum there, and they call it the San Siro. And it's important there, it's not like the San Siro, obviously, but it's their San Siro. It's their place of dreams, and thousands of people involved. This is Uganda. This is a women's project here, and we're working with them in terms of coaching, getting them involved to be coaches so that they can put more back into their community. We do these coaching programs, and from our headquarters in Edinburgh, our coaches go out and teach them to be coaches, then they coach other people to be coaches, so the whole thing spins off on itself. And we also create social enterprises, other little enterprises on the back of this. So particularly in Africa, this is one that happened here in Uganda with the women who've come from really difficult circumstances coming out of a refugee camp. Their lives have been horrendous. Get them involved in football, the first step. Get them involved in being coaches. And then we invested a little in their chicken farm. So this creates a little business for them, which creates jobs, knits the community together, and we're building it with the football first onto the enterprise. And they're selling chickens and eggs, obviously. Then back to the event, let me just swing through this. Very special picture which I like to show in Scotland in 2007 in Copenhagen. There's 48 teams there again, and Scotland won. So I can say I've seen Scotland win the World Cup, right? Not a lie. Amazing sight. Then in Melbourne, we're more countries. We have the first Women's World Cup there. That's Federation Square, for those of you who know Melbourne. And a fantastic final between Afghanistan and Russia, which Afghanistan won with the last kick of the ball almost and of the game. And everybody was cheering and the place was going crazy. And then the manager of the Afghan team gave a little speech at the end, and he said, for 30 years there's been darkness in Afghanistan. This is the first time a light went on. So everybody burst into tears at that point. So a fantastic emotion. I mean, sport, the power of sport, putting Russia, Afghanistan together on top of the whole homeless issue and creating such an exciting final. It comes up to a cauldron of something that was very, very special moment. Then we were in Milan in 2009, and in Rio in 2010 on Copacabana Beach. And of course, when you play soccer, street soccer in Brazil, what happens? The Women's World Cup's won by Brazil and the Men's World Cup's won by Brazil. But it was very special. And then last year we were in Paris under the Eiffel Tower. And all the time I would emphasize that it's about impact for us, it's about change, but again, Scotland won. And this year we are in Mexico, a little later on in the year, still having these consistent number of people changing. So it's not just about the people that get to the team, to the event, it's about the impact that's going on all the year round. And we keep growing and we keep wanting to do more. So this is our headline statistics. This is what drives us, because the events are nice to do, they're wonderful to do actually, but there'd be no point unless we were having change. So we're driven to create change. And the players are only allowed to come to the event one time. It's all about moving on. It's all about getting into your house. And then they start to become leaders themselves. The ex-homeless people become leaders. So many of them now are coaches and putting their own effort back. As these are just some of the people who have gone through that. Second along at the top there is Michelle, who's from Brazil, who was from the streets of Brazil, from Rio rather. And she became a professional footballer. She was the player of the tournament in Denmark, becomes a professional footballer, and now, despite having big posters of her around the place, she's still very young, just in her early 20s, she speaks to the kids in Rio going, get involved in football, don't get involved in drugs, follow me. And so she's a fantastic ambassador for what we do. One up in the corner there's a Scottish ex-player and then manager, David, who runs Street Soccer Scotland now. So very, very important. The people coming back, we identify them as leaders and support them and support the project so we can build this thing. And it's all based in our little office in Edinburgh, connecting around the world. So let me just show you a quick video. We've got a couple of minutes here, just of the players themselves speaking and what this is all about. And then I'll stop at that point. And this should work.
I want my life to change. I don't want to remain homeless.
With sport, everything's a level playing field. When you go out there, it doesn't matter who you're against, where they've come from. You play sport and you're even. And that's your chance to prove to them and to yourself that you're worth something.
We're here to do one thing, and that's play football.
There's no difference between people on a football pitch. Only difference is what you can do with the ball.
My father says that education is the best thing that you have. After education, football. Sport is lots of power because sport is the ambassador of peace.
Okay, so let me just finish by making just a couple of points. First of all, I really believe in enterprise. If we want to change things and create things, it's about being entrepreneurial. So all of you here at this conference because of that, and I would support you in anything you do. It's at some point you have to jump off the diving board, so just do it at some point, and it's a great journey to be on, whether you go as an entrepreneur or a social entrepreneur. The second point I would say is that it's very important that we create a world where you can do business, which is a good world rather than a bad world. And for a lot of people at the moment, the world is not a good place, and we need to change it. And what I hope I've demonstrated to you by the Homeless World Cup, and it's just a football, when you look at these statistics, like 100 million, or UN sometimes says 1 billion homeless people, we just go numb. I do lots of talks, and I ask people at the beginning, anybody think homelessness is a good idea? And in all the years I've been doing that, nobody said they think it's a good idea. So if it's not a good idea, why do we have it? And yet we're ingenious people. We create the internet, for example, whereby we can communicate all over the world, and some people can become billionaires around the internet, and we can send rockets to the moon, and we can create rockets to go around corners to win wars, but we can't solve homelessness. So I think there's an onus on all of us to do something, and it doesn't matter how tiny that is, but if you do a tiny something, and we each did a tiny something, then we will change the world for the better. And we need leaders and entrepreneurs to start that process and do things simply and in a small way together, and we'll change the world and make it better, make it a better place where we can do business. So I'll stop there. Thank you very much.